Dear participants, dear colleagues, both here and online, welcome to the launch of our report, Unlocking Nature Financing, National Cost Estimates for Effective Nature Restoration. My name is Branka Španíček. I work at Bankwatch as Strategic Area Lead for Finance and Biodiversity, and I will be your moderator today. As you know, after the Nature Restoration Regulation has been adopted, the national restoration plans are now under development. The process is very complicated and requires collaboration between different sectors. Besides agreeing on measures that should be implemented as parts of the plans, more member states have to support them also with reliable budgets. An exercise that is proven to be even more complicated, but it is crucial. Why? Because without a strong and meaningful budgets and financial backgrounds that supports the measures, the plans will not be able to achieve the targets and the goals of the regulation. So in order to support 5 member states, Croatia, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, and Poland, jointly, as joint work of Bankwatch, Estonian Green Movement, Euronatuur, Green Liberty, National Society of Conservationists, Friends of the Earth Hungary, Autop BirdLife Poland, and Zelena Akcja, we prepared this report that we will present today. Before we go through the agenda, I would like to first thank to Mr. Luena for hosting us. He's been supporting nature restoration and the regulation from the very start. Also thanks to our speakers today, who will share the most important insights into the financial needs for restoration, development of national plans, and also the main challenges the member states are facing. Maybe I can, let me just move the slides a bit, so you can see also our speakers. Okay, can you turn it on? Okay, good. So maybe I can just quickly guide you through our speakers today. So we will start with an introduction and a brief presentation of the report by Tess Hartmann Hergot, EU Policy Officer for Biodiversity Finance at Euronatuur. Then we will follow up with a keynote by Mr. Cesar Luena, Member of the Parliament from SD. We will then 2 case studies presented by our colleagues, one from Hungary by our colleague Zsuzsanna Új, a biodiversity campaigner from National Society of Conservationists, Friends of the Earth Hungary, and another one from Estonia by our colleague Tristan Saupold, a biodiversity campaigner from Estonian Green Movement. We will close this presentation part by a short introduction by Thomas Freisinger. He is a senior biodiversity officer at IUCN, who will also present a bit how the member states are supported while developing or elaborating their national plans. At the end, we will have a bit of time for a Q&A session. We will take few questions here from the audience, but also online. I hope that you will have many questions for us. Let's maybe continue with the presentations, and Tess, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Branka. If I could ask you to, thank you very much. A little bit about our study. I'll try to be brief and condense the study in about 8 minutes. I'll give you a bit of context. Of course, so as you're aware, right now member states are preparing to present their national restoration plans. They have until September this year to come up with their plans. And so the purpose of our study was to support 5 selected member states. So here, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Hungary, and Croatia, with estimating their financing needs for the implementation of the regulation. Now, this also comes in parallel, as I think you're also very much aware, with the negotiations for the EU's upcoming budget, the multi-annual financial framework, or MFF, which also introduces a novelty, which is the national and regional partnership plans, where member states will have to explain how they are planning, to outline how they plan to comply with selected branches of EU legislation. So we thought that there was also an opportunity to work on synergies and to make sure that member states come equipped with some estimates and some figures for the financing needs of their restoration plans, and that so that they have them also in mind when it comes to national and regional partnership planning and MFF negotiations. As you may know, there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment around the future of biodiversity funding, around the upcoming MFF. We see the disappearance of the LIFE program that is going to be merged possibly into broader funds, a lack of ring fencing for nature and environmental matters. So yeah, this is really an opportunity here to set things right. A bit about the scope of the study. So we have been focusing on the financing needs for the period 2024-2032, as outlined in the uniform format. It's one section that member states will have to fill. And we focused on the 4 most widespread terrestrial ecosystem types in these member states. And about the methodology, it is more complex than what I'm going to explain, but I tried to simplify it. What we did was looking at habitats in need of restoration in these member states and the area that they represent, and we multiplied that by the cost of restoration per square kilometer. And this cost of restoration was estimated based on existing projects, mainly LIFE projects. Can I ask you? Thank you. So here you can see the aggregate estimates for each of the member states. It might not appeal to you. It's a bit, it's a bit abstract so far. But these in the study, we also detail them per ecosystem type, and we also detail the calculations. And these are really meant for member states who will then be, and the selected ministries will be responsible for the outline of the plans. And disclaimer, this is really, we try to be as thorough as possible with our methodology and as conservative as possible, We try to be fair, actually. But this is really a minimum. It is highly likely that financing needs will be higher than what is here, but it is at least a basis to start from. What was also interesting throughout our study is that we came across a lot of difficulties. We had some concerns, and we also realized that a lot of member states face similar difficulties. And we tried to provide recommendations to make sure that national restoration plans are funded correctly and to overcome these barriers. So, I mean, our first concern, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it is the availability of EU public funding for restoration activities, especially in smaller member states, because smaller member states often rely more on EU funding for nature. So with the upcoming MFF, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So, of course, we recommend, to have decision makers to make their best to have an EU budget that delivers for nature restoration, but also to, as explained, to maximize the synergies between national and regional partnership plans and national restoration plans, and to possibly embed national restoration plans and make the NRPP funding conditional to viable national restoration plans. We also noticed that there was a lot of lack of publicly available and up-to-date data in a lot of member states, and a lot of in some member states there were really large shares. I think it was particularly in Croatia and Estonia. It was particularly in Croatia, where we saw that there were a lot of large shares, large habitats that were just in unknown conditions. So how can you assess how much funding needs you have when you don't know how much you actually need to restore? So here what we recommend is, well, for the European Commission to ensure the strict implementation of reporting obligation and to enforce, to make sure the member states do the necessary assessments. But for the member states' side, we recommend that to foresee additional budget for these habitats in unknown condition, to consider them to be in a bad condition, and to foresee budgets to reinforce capacity within the ministries as well, to proceed and do the necessary assessments. And in general, we also noticed that a lot of public authorities, whether it is at ministerial, national level, or local authorities, also lack capacity to elaborate the plans, but also then to make the necessary assessments and to monitor the implementation of the plans further on. So we also recommend national restoration plans to reflect these funding needs. I don't think I have the time to go through all of the recommendations here. Maybe one last one here. Considering that there is this uncertainty about the future, the availability of EU public funding for restoration, many member states may be tempted to present unambitious plans. Or go for the most cost-effective solution, which cost-effectiveness is, of course, a good bonus. But we do recommend that member states follow scientific recommendations when it comes to restoration needs. A couple more general recommendations, and I'll be brief. As I said, it is important to reinforce the synergies between these different processes, the MFF, national and regional partnership plans, national restoration plans, because, for the sake of policy coherence, first of all, but also we often talk about simplification, and this would be one way to also achieve that. We also encourage for the future MFF to have predictable funding and predictable funding for nature, which would also allow long-term planning through, namely, a standalone program dedicated to nature. And one last recommendation is to include local and regional authorities in restoration planning, because this will also allow to avoid unforeseen future costs due to a lack of expertise or due to a lack of stakeholder buy-in from local communities. I'll stop here. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions later.
Thank you, Tess.
Yeah. It's my turn.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the European Parliament for being here today. Also, many people online, I think. Thank you. Thank you, Euronatur, CEE, Bankwatch Network, and in general, all the organizations and experts who have contributed to this important report. Thank you for your explanation. And finally, thank you for the fight and for the resistance. I think it's the most important thing in our time, the fight and the resistance. Then thank you especially Tess, Thomas, Susan, Tristan, and Branca to put your face and your voice in this fight. Thank you so much. So 2 years ago, after a long and difficult political battle against the fight, against the resistance, we adopted the Nature Restoration Regulation. And I think it was a historic step. For the first time, we agreed not only to protect nature, also to restore ecosystems that have been degraded for decades. Now, the real work begins with the national plans. Member states are preparing these plans and will soon have to demonstrate how they intend to achieve the targets set out in the regulation. And this inevitably brings us to the most important question, the money, the financing. Because restoring rivers, wetlands, forests, grasslands requires money, investments, planning, and long-term commitment. So the report you are presenting today is therefore very, very timely. It reminds us of a very simple fact. If we are serious about restoring nature, we have to be serious about paying an investment for it. And that is exactly why many of us are concerned by the direction of the current budget debate. You know, at the very moment when member states are trying to calculate their restoration needs, the Commission is proposing a budget architecture that removes dedicated environmental spending targets and effectively dismantles LIFE as a standalone program. And this is a contradiction. At the same time, we are still waiting for the Commission to present its assessment of the financing gap required under Article 21.7 of the regulation. This Commission's evaluation should have helped us understand the real investment needs linked to implementation and should have informed the current debate on the next MFF. Instead, we are discussing how to redesign the funding architecture before we even know what the financing needs are. This is not the right approach, certainly. What today's report shows, your report very clearly, is that restoration requires long-term investment and financial certainty. Restoration is not simply about environmental policy. It is about how we manage water resources, improve the resilience of our landscapes, and reduce the growing costs associated with climate impacts. The costs of restoration are significant, but the costs of inaction will be far greater. This is the message I take from this report. If we want the nature restoration regulation to succeed, we need credible financing, clear priorities, and finally, dedicated resources. Because Europe's commitments must be matched by the means to achieve them. So I'm very pleased that this report brings evidence and concrete figures into this discussion. Because, I repeat, restoring nature is not only about setting targets. It is also about providing the tools and the resources needed to achieve them. So thank you. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for coming to the European Parliament. And I want to finish this speech, these words, to share you again the very, very dangerous, problematic time we are living in relation with the European Commission. We have on board the two less Greens responsible commissioners in the history. Neither Hoekstra, neither Roswell really work for the European Green Deal. Both of them work against. But, you know, like actors, in Spanish we have a word, disimulando. I don't know in English. Okay? It's a simulation. They are the anti-commissioners of the green policies. But we have hope. In the Commission, we have a special envoy of our fight, that is Teresa Rivera. And also progressive governments, especially, I say no because I am from Spain, it's because it's the truth, especially the Spanish government with Prime Minister Sanchez. So thank you for the report, for to be here, and for the fight in the future. That is very important. The next 3 years until to change the present majority in this Camera, in this Parliament, to resist the politics, the policies that we built in the last mandate. And that's important, your reports and your commitment, especially you. My memory is like the old man. Kristen, especially you, as young guy of Estonia. Okay, yeah, very important. Thank you and enjoy the debate and fight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lena, for also inspiring, but also very concerning words. We will now continue with the two case studies. So we will start with one related to Hungary. Zsuzsanna, you can start.
Good morning. Allow me please to present you the Hungarian chapter of this report. On the slide, you can see the land use in Hungary. It is a breakdown how Hungarians are using the land allocated for them in Europe. And you can see that agricultural areas take up much of this, much of the country. And even within that, cropland dominates the territory. We also have 21%, more than 20% of forests, but unfortunately, a big portion of these are just plantations, so they cannot be considered forests in the ecological sense. If you look really closely on the slide, you will see a small section that are old growth forests. I hope you can see it. No, please go back. It's right next to the section clear cuts and young. It's so small that you can hardly see it, but we do have them. These are the forests that represent older than 140 years old forests. And 40% of our real forests are actually clear cuts or very young thickets. Next slide, please, now. Yes, so this is a different breakdown of the territory. We have artificial and natural surfaces. As you can see, 80% of that is artificial. This includes everything agricultural and plantations, and the natural is 20%. So what do we consider natural? Natural areas are those where we have found the remnants of the natural vegetation. It means only just some key species, and we have counted this into the natural portion. We do have very healthy natural habitats, but these are so small that I couldn't visualize it with this software that I used for this breakdown. Thank you. So we can go to the next slide. Here you can see the habitats that we have considered within this report, the habitat categories. And as you see, as a rule of thumb, 50% of them are in not good condition. So these are those territories that will need the habitat restoration. Altogether, these are 4,200 square kilometers in Hungary, which is less than 5% of the entire Hungarian surface. And Tess has already told us the number, the most important number, 386 million euros, that will be necessary as a minimum for restoring 30% of these habitats that are in not good condition. Now, I have already disclosed this number to some of my colleagues and acquaintances, and they were all shocked that it's really expensive. So I thought that when I come here for this presentation, I will give you some comparisons. So let's see the first comparison. Now, this 386 million euros are just 1 million short of the club competitions that the UEFA is using for organizing these club competitions like the Champions League. And we all know that football is really lucrative. It can give you an 11-fold profit. But I can assure you that biodiversity can even topple that and give you even more profit. So let's go to the next slide. We all know that motorways are really expensive. And in Hungary, you can build 10 to 30 kilometers of motorways from this 386 million euros. And let's see some battery factories. There are many in Hungary, and they receive state funding. Some battery factories receive funding from the EU. They all receive much more than 386 million euros. And my final comparison are CAP direct payments. Hungary disburses 950 million euros of direct payments annually to farmers. So as you can see from these comparisons, we have the money available. The question is how we are investing them, investing these amounts, these financial resources. So please have a look, a more closer look to this picture I have put on the slide. Here you can see central Hungary, which is seriously affected by desertification. And I have taken this photo strategically at the border of a Natura 2000 grassland that has been restored from EU funding. And it was not the LIFE funding, it was cohesion funds, and not even the environmental cohesion funds. That was not even the operational program that was designed for the environment in Hungary, but it was from a competitiveness funding. And on the left hand, on the left side of the picture, you can see a traditional farmland where the soil is completely exposed to the elements, to the sun, to the UV radiation. And it's difficult to see from the picture, but it's a hillside, so there's a lot of erosion going on. We will see it on the next slide, which is an area view. And I have taken the photo where the red arrow is. So thanks to the EU funding, this river can flood this grassland and create this really beautiful mosaic habitat. The rangers and together with the local civilians and beavers are maintaining the infrastructure that was built from this EU funding, and it's going on really well. Why do the civilians do it? They feel climate change on their skins, and they are really worrying. So they have this grassroots movement, this bottom-up movement. They call themselves water guardians, and they go everywhere in the country, and they build these small water retention dams. These small projects that you see on the left side of the picture cost less than 386 euros, 386 single euros. Thank you. So drought, we are speaking about drought, so let's talk a little bit about woodlands. We are in the same region, the Great Hungarian Plain. On the left, you can see a dying or dead forest. It's a conifer plantation, completely alien to this region. And it's simply impossible to regenerate it. It cannot regenerate by itself. And the small saplings that are built, that are planted by the foresters die because the lack of rain, because the UV radiation, and because of climate change. So here what we see is that climate change and bad forest management together create this really serious situation that forests are drying and dying en masse. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture of another management type. This is this steppe oak forest that you see in the background is managed by the national park, and it is within the framework of a LIFE program that aims to create a forest management plan where the oak forests are capable of regenerating themselves. How they do that? Well, they allow some shrubs to grow, and this way, for example, elderberry or hawthorn, they can act as nurse plants or nurse shrubs for the oak. So the difference between the two forests is that one cannot regenerate and the other can regenerate. But in one aspect, they are similar. They cannot provide timber. The regeneration is very slow in the natural forests. So this is an economic problem, not an ecological problem. And this economic problem needs an economic solution. Why am I telling you all these examples? It is because what I see on the ground is that these projects within the that can happen thanks to the EU funding. They can create economic solutions to other sectors, to farmers, to agriculture, and for example, to water management. So I'm really hoping that ring-fenced biodiversity funding can happen, because these have very good economic outcomes as well. And it is also possible within the framework of these projects to manage conflicts, land use conflicts. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Zsuzsanna. We will now follow with the case study from Estonia. Tristan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The nature restoration plan comes to Estonia at a time where the state of nature is deteriorating. The last Habitats Directive report shows that in 5 years, the share of habitat types in good status decreased by 6%, and the share of species in bad status more than doubled. Now, in Estonia, the expert groups have developed comprehensive measures based on nature's needs. Next steps in our drafting process are newly introduced working groups for assessing practicality, as well as socio-economic and financial assessments. The ministry has already confirmed that the draft will be submitted not by September, but by the end of the year. In our analysis, we used high-quality, representative, and restoration-focused projects. For wetlands, we found that the average, or to be correct, median price for hectare was 443 euros, leading to a final cost of 7 million euros. For rivers, lakes, and riparian habitats, the final cost is 42 million euros, and for grasslands, around 8 million euros. And in summary, for the first period of NRP, restoration costs for the 3 ecosystem groups should be around 70 million euros. Now, nature restoration plan in Estonia comes with some major challenges. One recent update has been that it is confirmed that the Minister of Climate will count earlier projects, as they can be counted as areas where measures are still taking effect, which means that only more than 11,000 hectares of restorations will be envisioned until 2030, which is around 40% of the 30% we need to restore of habitats in bad condition. And for our calculation, this update means that the estimation is not additional, but full cost for the period. Meanwhile, it can be applied very well for the next period, possibly as well. Another big challenge is that the plan's funding sources remain unsure. We know that some common agriculture policy funding will be available for agriculture measures, but for other measures, such as habitats restorations, we are counting on our NRPP, also a life strategic nature project, and possibly state budget and nature credits, but all these are in doubt, and we can't depend on any of these as of now. And another issue I also already mentioned, which is that we will be late with our draft submission. It will be by the end of the year, not by September, and the timeline will be tight, which means that there is less time left for consulting with the Commission. And another specialty maybe for Estonia is that the state has a very strong preference for restoring only state lands, and it needs to be assessed how much this is impossible. This is in accordance with the goals of the NRP, and for recommendations, we bring out 5 key things both the European side and the national side need to keep in mind for an ambitious NRP that actually manages to help nature. Firstly, nature restoration needs should be a priority in MFF and NRPP discussions, keeping in mind both 2030 and 2040 targets. For example, in Estonia, only one proposal basically helps to reach the restoration targets. And if we do not get that proposal approved, or if we do not get that incorporated in the NRPP, we have a very big problem with financing. Now, also, we need to truly acknowledge nature restoration as an investment and go beyond minimal compliance, which might be a threat based on recent developments. We need to choose measures by efficiency and impact, not affordability. We need to refrain from excluding private lands and provide sufficient compensations for landowners, because excluding private lands is not based on nature's needs. And finally, we need to clarify areas in an unknown status as soon as possible. There aren't as many as in Croatia, in Estonia, but there are some, and for a more precise analysis, it is needed now. We have great measures developed based on nature's needs in the Estonian expert groups. Now we need to ensure the finances and implement them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Now I would like to hand over to Thomas to tell us a bit more based on basically your work that you are doing with the member states related to the national restoration plans. What are your, let's say, key insights?
Thank you very much, Branka. Thank you very much also for the invitation to this event. The work that IUCN has been doing in the Eurozone is quite similar in terms of cost calculation. But before starting, I wanted just to remind that this is quite pioneering work that has been done in this report. And it definitely merits a lot of credit and kudos, because most of the member states are currently not able to do the same kind of calculation. And it's one of the limitations of the whole process. So chapeau bas to this project and to everyone who has collaborated on this study. Now, the context is has been described quite well, but I would like to remind just one thing, that with restoration, unfortunately, uncertainty is built in the projects. So there is also a certain uncertainty that we have to live with on the delivery of those projects, what ecosystems will evolve to, and take into account, of course, all the climate change related impacts over time. Restoration is a very long process, and we know that in the current timelines, a lot of things happen in 1-2 years. Besides that, there's another big challenge, which is that costs come now, and we have to come up with solutions, while the benefits come over time, which is also not very adequate for the way we think as a society and as an economy, which brings further challenges. Now, what IUCN has been doing as an international organization, we have been involved by the European Commission through DG Environment and SG Reform to provide technical assistance to 3 member states, Croatia, Poland, and the Netherlands, as well as France, which is a closed project. And I would like to bring a few elements especially from the French case. So we came up with very similar numbers to what has been presented on the slides, obviously proportionate also to the size and the diversity of ecosystems present, for example, in France. Once we have this, we can create awareness, but I think it would be too easy to think that it stops there, because once you have the overall numbers, you can start discussion. This is just a starting point of the whole process that follows, meaning creating discussions in the sectoral ministries, which is key, which hasn't happened enough yet. And we know that there's quite a lot of conflicts in between the environmental ministries often and other ministries, which is something that also, given the structure of the next multi-annual financial framework will require more integration, more dialogue to make sure that co-benefits are taken into account between sectors. But what comes up very often in the regional consultations at state level is that those overall numbers don't say much to people. And that requires a translation to more local and regional needs and potential benefits, which is a even more complex step than just coming up with the overall numbers. And this is key if we want commitment, which starts with awareness, of course, but also long-term results. So if we are not able to explain and discuss with landowners and farmers what benefits will be and why costs are key now, but will turn into benefits in the future, it's very limiting. So the very high level numbers that we get from UN or at EU level, sometimes they are good to create awareness, but they need translating. And this is what currently lacks quite a lot. Now, in terms of very concrete steps, and this is perhaps the most challenging because it's far away from MFF negotiation, but it dives into the actions where I think we have more potential to work well, is the actual integration of the nature restoration activities into the NRPPs, which sounds easy, but it's very challenging. But I think one exercise to start with is definitely to put the draft nature restoration plans in their latest and most advanced version against also the Annex 1 of the performance framework of the proposal on the MFF, to see also what are the output indicators and how to identify the co-benefits. Given the competition between the different topics that we'll have in the national and regional partnership plans, we will have to work with many other ministries and sectors to make sure that activities get financed also, for example, through agriculture money, but also energy, etc., etc. So this, as again, sounds very easy, but discussions and dialogue need to be built, and the foundations for that are not always present. So there is no early stage or not too early stage to begin that, but really to invite for intersectoral dialogues to make sure that some financing can come up for those activities. Now, I wanted just to bring, perhaps to put light on a few other criteria when it comes to cost estimations. And I think we believe that we start from zero and that we are now calculating costs between 2026, for example, or 2024 in the study, until either 32, 30, 50, etc. Actually, we start with a negative, and that needs to be taken into account. So all the estimations that we will come up with start from way below than what we are actually accounting for, meaning the more different cost estimations we will get, the more accurate it will become. But all of those will very likely be an underestimation of the actual costs. Just because if we have to rely on the past monitoring costs, which are very high and funding has not been adequate in the past 20 years, it means that we're starting from a point that is already negative and not ground zero. In addition to that, all the preparatory steps and permitting and project management costs linked to restoration are very often forgotten. And if we talk about perpetuity of projects, so meaning the restoration projects turning then into, for example, strict protection, those costs will come on top, which means that those numbers are very helpful to create awareness, but it's really just the beginning. And the invitation is rather to go a bit further, include the additional costs, but also try to translate those costs in something that says something to people, especially those concerned who will have to deliver the work on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you also to all other presenters for really interesting presentations and really impactful insights. We will now have, I'm just mindful of the time, we will have a few minutes for a Q&A session. We will post here also our email addresses. So if in case we cannot answer or don't have time to answer all of your questions, please feel free to contact us. we will gladly reply. Maybe we can take 2 questions from the audience here, and also we have some questions already from the online audience. So yes, please. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for organizing this session. It gives a kind of clear view that we are not ready to put something on the table towards the MFF being, I think, finalized now already, or in drafting anyway. But yeah, I have a few questions. I will put them all maybe and then see whoever or whenever they can be answered. The costs that are now calculated before we can start, because awareness needs and consultations and MFF reactions and so on, they will become just higher the longer we wait. That's what we should emphasize also. The longer we wait, the more costs. There is, I don't know whether that has been taken into account to clarify the targets and the priorities. It might be good to have a separate costing of the real priorities, to have a nature restoration plan that shows where you want to start and how you want to start. Might give a difference already. We know that we are not getting everything of the budget that we ask. So let's start with something that we can do and prove that we can do it. I thought it was an obligation for the member states to include an estimation of the costs in their nature restoration plans. Are those ones going to be checked again whenever all have been submitted through your same approach to see whether how you fit in the total? And just another question, is the disappearance of the LIFE funding, like you said, Ms. Hartman, already decided, divided over other possible fundings? That would be really a pity. I thought it was still in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and question. Yeah, so about your first question, I think about the reassessments. I mean, actually, to react on your first comments, I mean, as I said, and what we provide, it's an approximation for terrestrial ecosystems. It is a minimum. It is likely to be higher. And as you say, the more we wait, the more costly it's going to be, the more habitats and ecosystems are going to be suffering damages. So yes, the sooner, the better. But yeah, to answer your question about the reassessment, we were just discussing this earlier. We will, of course, be looking at the plans that the member states provide once they're published. And we also, I mean, as mentioned, there are a lot of data gaps at the moment. So we use the data that we manage to get, but sometimes it's just unavailable, and the habitat, some large areas are in unknown condition. We expect this to improve. We hope for this to improve. We hope that member states will make the responsible choice to invest in these assessments. So with this additional information and the figures that they're going to present, we hope to be able to reassess the cost estimates. And your last question was about the future of life. Yeah, it's still very much under discussion. For now, yeah, I mean, there's no certainty, as it's not completely out of the picture yet. I mean, as environmental NGOs, we are still fighting for it. Also, I mean, not only for us as environmental NGOs, but also because it is a program that works. It is a program where a lot of thousands of jobs, also green jobs, are also connected to life. It allows, as I mentioned, for multi-annual programming, for also the implementation of international projects. So yeah, and without it, well, all of these things are at risk of disappearing. So let's keep fighting for it.
Thank you, Tess. Is there another question from the room? we have quite a bit in the online audience, but yeah, please, Andras, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Andras Krolop from the Nature Conservancy. Thank you, Tess, and thanks for all the speakers. That's a really interesting topic and really diving into what is actually the cost of restoration. I'd like to bring it to the next level because we talk a lot about public funding, what plays, of course, an incredibly important role, and we do need public funding. But being a little bit provocative, what is the role of public funding? Are we considering public funding from EU budget, but also from national state budgets to actually do the intervention on the side? Or it is more to be used for unlocking other kind of resources as well? Or could it be both ways? And then, of course, I need to come down to the famous 1 to 8 return on investment ratio, that if you are using public funding to restore nature, and that is actually start generating revenues down the line somewhere, and I would love to see some business model how it is happening. Is there a way to capture that revenues and put it back to nature restoration as well, or at least maintenance? That would be, I think, quite interesting to look into that. And the last one is we shouldn't forget that nature could be quite resilient. So how much is what needs active management for restoration, and what is we just let nature be nature, and nature will recuperate and restore itself? What brings me back to the question of indirect support for nature restoration. Again, the famous subsidy reform. If we start eliminating environmentally harmful subsidies and incentives, could that also be used for nature restoration as well? Let me stop there because I understood there's quite a few other questions from online. Thank you.
I'm not sure I can answer all of your questions, but maybe starting with the first one on. So your first one was using public funding to then also attract co-financing from private sources, right? I mean, yes, but for this, it is true that, again, to talk about life, but also public funding in general, it also acts and provides as a sort of guarantee for external funders. It does attract co-financing, whether it is from additional, top-ups from national public funding or philanthropy or from the private sector. So yeah, indeed, it is. We do not exclude this as a ways to finance the restoration plans, but there is a need for public funding and EU public funding. And especially in the member states that we studied here, there is a high reliance of these member states on EU public funding when it comes to nature. So removing that could have a cascading effect in the sense that, it could create, an absence of a co-financing in that sense. Do you want to react? Okay.
If I may add a few points to that. You mentioned environmental harmful subsidies. That's priority number one. Whether they can be directly used, that's a big question because it depends on each subsidy you look at. Can it be repurposed in that way? That's always a case-by-case question to ask ourselves. But I think that there is still a lack of understanding how much EU member states use EU funds for biodiversity. There's no review of that available, and that's purely a statistical exercise to do. So I think when we talk about costs and we want to look at how we cover those costs, it's also for us to understand how much is actually used through different funds. Some are more reliant on Horizon, some are more reliant on other funds. That would be quite interesting as a first exercise to do. And then, so basically a biodiversity expense review on national funding and EU funding. That would be the starting point, which takes a bit of time, but is feasible because data is public and is not too complex of a task. And then to understand what role private finance can have, it will have a role just because the context is that it is. We know that there will be less public. Where does the financing come from, if not from the private? So there's plenty of mechanisms. We're currently looking into the potential, of course, also of nature credits in several member states. But I just want to bring back one topic from the political process, which is not what restoration regulation says or doesn't say, but just understand a bit what the process in member states are Some member states are going to submit a nature restoration plan with only activities that have already committed budget on them. So the question, I mean, it also comes really from the national level, what they are able to provide and what kind of expectations should they put in their plans towards, for example, EU funding, if they have absolutely no idea what it's going to be. So there is also a lack of clarity there, and the ambition of the plans will be dependent also on that clarity or lack of clarity.
Thank you very much. We will have time for one question from the online audience, but also maybe just a reminder, we will send the presentation to everybody. It will also contain our contact details. So really, in case we didn't answer your questions, especially for the online audience, please do reach out and we'll try to. And the report itself, of course, we will also send it out.
Yeah, so I will try to choose that one question we can manage to ask this time. So the Mr. Hugo Henov asks whether the cohesion between the national restoration plans and national and regional partnership plans is already ensured in the MFF proposal. Well, he states that it's ensured in the MFF proposal of the European Commission. And the question is, how can we technically changes in the legal text strengthen this cohesion to ensure that national restoration plans are fully integrated in the national and regional partnership planning? Yeah, to all of you, I guess, whoever wants to pick up.
Yes, there is indeed in the regulation of the national and regional partnership plans, there is a mention of the nature restoration regulation, and in the annexes, in the not the uniform format, but in the template that was provided, there is a mention where member states will have 1,000 characters to describe how they're going to comply with the obligations under the nature restoration regulation, which is, in our opinion, insufficient, and in the sense that it also doesn't, I mean, there is no mention, no obligation to explain how member states are going to finance these and to what extent. It's also about, I mean, as I think that Thomas also mentioned it a little bit, it's also about looking at which measures, I mean, the NRPPs, it introduces this new, I mean, performance-based model a little bit, inspired from the RF. We saw from the examples of the RF that not much money went into biodiversity funding. So, well, will these mistakes be replicated? I mean, how will the European Commission make sure that member states actually do present measures and milestones to comply with the obligations under the nature restoration regulation? And this is what we are worried about and what we would like to emphasize.
Thank you, Tess. Yes, please really do reach out to us in case you have any questions. Yeah, we are at the end. I would really like to thank you all for your participation, both here and online. I really hope that this short, let's call it an intervention of ours, was really useful for you. Yeah, and we wish you a nice, pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.